Hello, everyone, and happy Saturday is the day we're recording today. I'm Dr. Stephen Freiberg, aka the Dad Anesthesiologist, and I'm so excited and honored. And if you float in these circles at all, this is really kind of a celebrity fanboying moment to get to talk with Dr. Madhav Swaminathan, pretty much universally known as referred to as Swami. I got to work with Swami when I was a fellow at Duke University Hospital in cardiothoracic anesthesia. Swami is a professor of anesthesia at Duke University Hospital. He's also the immediate past president of the American Society of Echocardiography. He's the first anesthesiologist to hold that position. He also has expertise in perioperative kidney injury. He's one of the most world-renowned experts in perioperative transesophageal echocardiography. He's very well published in just about everything, but I always find quite interesting, published about getting published, which is pretty meta in that regard. And in addition to all that, what I was always amazed by when I got to work with him, he's just a consummate gentleman, just as quick with a joke and to have fun with in the OR, and so obviously a dedicated family man as well. So I really looked up to him a lot, was always excited to get to work with him. So Swami, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Stephen, that was quite an introduction. I'm impressed by what you just said. I didn't think I did all those things, but thank you. It was a pleasure having you as a fellow at Duke as well. So thanks a lot for doing this.
No, thank you. And so I guess just we'll hit the ground running. And to start off, tell us a little bit about your medical journey. What got you into medicine? How did you end up in anesthesiology? Your very sort of specialized areas in anesthesiology. I just want to hear all about it.
We may not have that much time, but thank you. Well, I don't remember actually ever having thought of career choices, ever. I do remember when I was very young, around maybe 5, 6 or something like that, I was really impressed by our family doctor. And at that sort of age, I had told my mother and father that that's what I wanted to become. I wanted to become a physician. That's the only kind of doctor I knew, who was our sort of pediatrician kind of thing. And I said, I want to become a doctor when I grow up. And I actually never thought about it twice until I reached high school in India. And we were supposed to give, in India, you go straight into medicine after high school. And so I was taking the exams, and it suddenly, for the first time in my lifetime, had dawned on me that I may not actually make it through that qualification exam. That is a possibility. And my father asked me at that point, he said, so what's your plan B? And I said, I don't have one. I had always thought of becoming a physician, and that's what I set my mind to. And then I qualified. I went into medicine in Delhi University, in a great hospital, in a great medical school. Finished my medicine, met the woman of my dreams. She was in college as well. And I picked anesthesiology because, again, there was a role model there that I was exposed to who just impressed the hell out of me. And I said, this is the kind of career I can see myself in for the rest of my life. And from that point onwards, I always sort of tried to adopt that approach that there are those 3 things. Everything falls into groups of 3, as you can recall from our echo conversations in the OR, that either I could see myself doing it for the rest of my life, or something that I could see myself doing, but I wouldn't miss it if I didn't. And there was something that I just couldn't see myself doing for the rest of my life. And so when I got exposed to anesthesia, because of this role model of ours, then cardiac anesthesia was that first thing to just strike me as being, this is the kind of thing that I would spend the rest of my life with. Same thing happened with echo, and so on and so forth. So then, I went into anesthesia, then did, in India, the residency is quite prolonged. And so it's about 6 years or so. And then, so I went into cardiac anesthesia for the final 2 years, and then got a great position in a private hospital. Then I realized that I wanted to actually be an academic. So then I went to Belgium for a scholarship, and then I went to the UK for a fellowship in cardiac anesthesia, and then I came to Duke, and then I never looked back. So my Duke journey actually is now 20 years. So last month, or actually 1st of July, I started my 21st year at Duke.
Well, congratulations.
It's the longest job I've ever held.
Well, fair enough. It sounds like, they were quick to probably try and run you out of all the other places you worked at. You can't, sounds like you couldn't hold a job. So I am equally surprised that you've been in one place as as long as you.
Well, you know, in the words of when I told Jack Shanewise and Bob Savage, who I met, you know, about 15 years ago or so, I told Bob Savage that I, you know, did multiple fellowships in different places, and so Jack Shanewise said, "Well, looks like you know, it just took too long to train you," kind of thing, you know. So I said, "Well, that could be it. I don't know. I was a professional student for a long time."
Fair enough. And I had a pretty similar journey in some ways. I was very struck as, you know, as my pediatrician, like it just seemed like this was the only thing I was going to do. And then very similarly, made my way surprisingly into med school and whatnot. And, you know, was struck by an anesthesiologist. And it's amazing how the folks in our lives can leave such an influence on us and shape our careers.
Absolutely.
And now tell us, you mentioned a little bit, you mentioned the woman of your dreams when you were, I believe you said either in college or in medical school. Tell us a little bit about your family, your wife, your children, all of that great stuff.
Yeah, I met my wife as a medical student, and we were 19 at the time. And it took a while for her to come around. It really did. You know, I had to work really hard at it. And of course, as you know, luck would have it, when I did propose to her, she said, "What took you so long?" So, you know, go figure. But anyway.
You take a long time to train, so.
Exactly. It takes me a long time to learn anything. Yeah. So that was it from 19. And then we got married at the age of 24. We had our first child in 94. He's now 26 years old. And our second one, who is now 24 years old. Or they're just about to be in a couple of months. So yeah, two boys, both were born in India. And then after that, when they were really little, I decided to inflict some more pain on my wife by saying, let's just leave the country and let's go out. I want to train more. I want to become an academic. And the saint that she is, she said, sure, let's just do it. And she left her job as a journalist, and we've enjoyed each other's company and that sort of journey ever since.
Wow.
It's been fabulous.
Did your family move with you to all the different countries you mentioned? So they went with you in the UK and Belgium and the US? That's pretty a remarkable experience, I would imagine, for all involved. Certainly comes with its challenges, but it's definitely some benefits and excitement to those journeys, I'm sure.
Well, it was really exciting in the sense that, you know, it's one thing to go and visit places, but it's a completely different thing to live there with the people and you know, absorb the culture, and it's tremendously educational. You know, those kind of things don't leave you at all your life. And you know, travel is just, as Mark Twain said, travel is fatal to bigotry and prejudice.
Sure.
It really is. And that it was my biggest education. I've traveled and lived all over the world as well. So traveling was nothing new throughout my life. But then once we came to North Carolina, this seemed to become home after that.
Sure. And, you know, you're clearly passionate about a variety of things in your life, but it was very clear to me how passionate you are about your family. Tell me your favorite part about being a father.
Well, it's sort of that bittersweet kind of thing that, you know, I enjoy the moments I spend with them. It's amazing watching them grow. It's amazing to celebrate moments where you feel success. And I'll give you a couple of examples that just made, you know, everything else seem worthwhile. Sure. And one of those was, you know, my 26-year-old, he has autism. And so we learned to celebrate victories. And those victories may not seem like victories to a lot of people, but they were really solid victories for us. So when he was about, I think, 8 or 9, I forget exactly, but it was around that time when we asked him a question, and he actually lied. And so my wife and I were sort of high-fiving each other. Wow. Because he lied, and we wrote about it. And the wonderful thing was that, of course, at that point we were trying to instruct him on the right thing to do, and you know, the bad thing is to lie, and blah blah blah. But what really made us feel good about the fact was that he was growing. Mm-hmm. He was growing, and he was learning the complexities of telling the truth. And and you know, lying takes an extra level of cognitive ability, and so to us that was heartwarming to see that growth, although it wasn't really in that in the mold that we wanted, but we did celebrate that little moment. Sure. Another one was when my son, who's 24, a couple of years ago, when he started working out of college, And he, we went out for dinner, and at one point he just looks at me and says, "Don't worry, Dad, I got this." And he takes out his credit card and he pays for it, and and I'm like, wow, these are milestones which you have to learn to celebrate. So there have been some beautiful, beautiful moments, and I'm sure every dad and every parent can recount those throughout their lives. Different moments present themselves at different times, and we've been fortunate to have many.
That's amazing. And among your many accolades, I know you're very involved in the autism community and the autism support community. And I've been able to follow some of those moments with you when we were working together and in social media. I believe he just finished college. Is that correct as well? And,
a couple of years ago, he's working now.
I mean, that's really so amazing. And I think I met him briefly at one of the orientations, and such a nice guy and really remarkable. And I'm sure that's a reflection, amongst many things, the parenting that he had. So.
Well, it has largely to do with the amount of time his mother spent with him, and I get to watch in admiration. I get to watch the result, really well, and I get to enjoy those beautiful moments. It's not that there aren't challenges, of course there are, but you learn to celebrate both sides of the coin, and it's important to take time out and celebrate those good moments because those challenges never go away.
Absolutely. And therefore, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges about being a father?
Oh, without doubt, time. This thing about, when you are early on in your career and you're trying to develop your career, it is gut-wrenching to balance the two. And I always think that, work-life balance is a myth. And there is no such thing like balance. It's actually work-life integration, or it's actually the most comfortable imbalance you can achieve, or that you are comfortable with. And of course, it's like a seesaw. So at times, work gets heavy, and at times home gets heavy. And there's no such thing like separation or clear separation of the two. And they can intermingle. And that is where the work-life integration issue comes in. I was careful early on in my career to ensure that my weekends were spent at home, and my weekends weren't spent with my laptop at home.
Right.
And so that was hard during fellowship, but then I tried to keep that a principle as much as I could adopt afterwards. And, my wife and I developed this sort of payback system where I would start traveling a lot. And if I traveled during the weekends, which was her time, right, I'd have to pay that back. So I'd have to pay that back in terms of the non-clinical days that I had, that I would actually stay at home and spend time with her and with the kids. And so, when you are growing your career, this can be the biggest challenge, that you want to spend time with your family, and it becomes hard. So the way to think about doing that, I think, is to spend quality time more than quantity time, to make the moments that you can spend count. And I'm sure every parent does that. But you need a marshal, you need a monitor, you need someone to watch you and and give you feedback, saying, hey, that's not okay. And my wife does that really well, as you might imagine. And she tells me that, hey, there are these calls coming in and there's these emails coming in, but you may want to just step back for a moment and just take a look. And because we need to get things done, we need time here. And I realized, yeah, actually, this is not really fair. And, when you take that sort of break, you realize that, the world does go on. It's okay. Right. As indispensable as you might think or want yourself to be. It's okay. Things can wait. And there are certain things that really can't wait, like your family. So, you take those hard knocks at times, and then you realize that, time is well spent. But that remains that biggest challenge. It really is a big challenge.
Right. And I think what you hit on is what I've heard several echo, is that it's, to an extent, quality more than quantity, though it can't be complete absence. And just being intentional and making choices and taking those moments where you might have to say, and it's not always easy, but, this can wait, you can close the laptop. And exactly like you said, life and work will go on without you. It's pretty impressive how that will happen. But, even your family life will go on without you. But whether you want that to happen and be left behind is something I'm less comfortable with. So.
Yeah. And one of the things I always also, tell incoming fellows or younger faculty is that you want to have a smile on your face at 6 a.m. going in, and you want to have a smile at 6 p.m. going back home. You want to be happy both ways. And if you're unhappy one way, it's miserable. But if it's unhappy both ways, you're sunk.
Yeah.
You know, that's really terrible. So making sure that both worlds of yours are held in balance is okay. And one of those worlds is way more important, because if that doesn't work, then almost nothing else will.
Right. That's a good point. And so, talked quite a bit about family. Switch back to medicine a bit. What is your favorite part of either medicine or your favorite thing about being a physician?
So over the years, things have evolved in the sense that I really enjoyed the clinical aspect, the rough and tumble, if you will, of cardiac anesthesia, the echo, doing stuff, watching results. But then over the years, teaching, became, a big part of what made me happy. And because it dawned on me also that in order to keep my skill levels up or my knowledge level up, the only way I could do that is to teach, because you tend to get rusty as you grow older. You tend to get a little more distant. It gets harder because things are developing at such a rapid pace. It's a challenge to keep up with stuff. And so one way of doing that is to try and teach. It forces you to be on top of your game. It really does. And so that really became, a passion and a mechanism. And also watching fellows and residents, reach higher levels, such as you. It's very heartwarming. It really is. People doing great things all over the place, and you realize that they took those first few unsteady steps in the OR, and then they emerged sort of victorious after that whole experience. So that's really heartwarming to see.
Some of us were more unsteady than others, so we're still trying to find our footing. But luckily, we had folks like you to guide us. So, and what do you think is the current biggest challenge, either to medicine or in medicine, the biggest challenge about being a physician?
So I think, wearing the two hats that I have, well, not really two hats, but one as a physician in general, an anesthesiologist, and the other one is an intensivist. And in the cardiac anesthesia realm and in the intensive care realm, just the challenge is keeping up with the rapid pace of development. Of knowledge and the way things happen, and then the way things develop in terms of processes and workflow, and just keeping up with all that is really, really one of the biggest challenges that I think exists. On a personal level, the thing that I find the hardest is, as an intensivist, having these end-of-life discussions with families, and just watching families struggle with end-of-life care, and having those discussions, being sensitive to different people's needs, is very draining. And so, although it is satisfying at the end to see some families take those steps and realize the importance of that discussion, it is very, very draining, emotionally draining as well. So I think that's one of those difficult parts of what we do as intensivists. That has been what I find quite challenging as well.
And I think that's one of the things that attracts many folks to intensive care medicine, is the opportunity to be there for the families. And then at the same time, I think it's one of the components of critical care that a lot of physicians, especially newer physicians, continue to grow and build that skill set to be able to do so well. So not surprising, especially the emotional weight involved, that remains one of those challenges.
It is a challenge. It's satisfying as well, and it's an opportunity to make a solid difference in people's lives. But it's hard work. It really is a challenge.
Absolutely. And so you've got so much experience both in parenting and in medicine. What advice would you give to young parents as your as Swami's tips for parenting?
Oh goodness, Swami's tips for parenting. Like my mother used to say, the first 30 years are the worst.
Okay.
There are different challenges that present themselves at different stages in life. So if you think that the terrible twos or something that's the worst, or the worst is behind us, or toileting is the main thing, and after that things will be okay, it doesn't really stop. So you might as well get used to the fact that different challenges will present themselves at different stages of life. But overall, it's really a great journey. I think time is the biggest factor that you can spend, that you can provide, that you can give to the family. And I think this is really the key thing that I learned, that you've got to be careful of making sure that that world of yours at home is a stable world. It cannot come at the expense of your professional life at all. And a lot of decisions you make may need to sacrifice some of your professional goals, if you will, and that's fine. That may be okay. But if you do it the other way around, then it really doesn't work well. And the other thing we did was we worked by consensus. And so if we were not unanimous in our decisions, we didn't do that.
Got it.
We didn't agree to disagree. We just didn't do it if we disagreed.
Right.
So everything we did was by consensus. And we realized that if one person didn't like it, we respected that person's choice. Especially when it came to decisions about the kids, major things about moving, about finances, about, all these things about moving different countries, and my wife deciding to stay at home or working from home. She's a journalist. And all those kinds of things always required a joint decision and a respect for what that decision meant. And I guess, when you also have to think about when you make these consensus decisions, and sometimes they may not work in the sense that you decided that you had a different opinion and your spouse had a different opinion, you can't hold on to that and say that, see, I told you so kind of thing. That doesn't work. It's like, if you are in a group, in a leadership group, in a cabinet, if you will, and you disagree with the group's opinion, but you agree with the group's collective decision.
Sure.
And you may not appreciate the fact that your decision was in isolation and was not taken up as a group choice, but then you've got to abide by a democratic principle as well over there, and so then that becomes your position.
Right.
And so you've got to sort of adopt that same principle everywhere. And the unexpected or expected benefit of that is that the kids realize that the parents are totally united. It's when mom says something, I can't run to dad, and when dad says something, I can't run to mom. They both unknowingly support each other, and I can't do a thing. So they tend to realize that, and kids absorb things so fast.
Yes.
And they're like sponges, and all throughout their lifetimes they are sponges. And you may think, when there are ups and downs, especially when there are downs, that the common refrain is that, haven't you learned anything, kind of thing. You want to tell your kid that, and what have you learned over the years? You see that we're like this or we're like that, and they learn. They keep it at the back of their heads. And I remember a time when my younger son came and told us, after a very difficult conversation that he had with both of us, at the end he says, don't worry, the values that you taught me will always stay.
Wow.
And don't worry, I'll make the right decision. And we were just stunned and step back. And these kind of moments are very rewarding, and that make you realize that the stance that you took was good, was okay, was fine. And I think you'll never regret it, having that position where you say that we will have a consensus decision on everything. That's our position, and you probably will never regret that.
Wow, it's definitely good advice. And what is Swami's tips for young physicians, whether that's folks either early in their professional career or trainees? What is your biggest advice for them?
So, I guess when you're a trainee, you've got to really work hard at your skill level, technical expertise. But remember that technical expertise is all about practice.
Sure.
And the more you do, the better you get it. So you're not going to be able to become that solid expert at the end of your 12 months or 24 months or whatever that is. It's knowledge in progress and acquisition. And that will keep, it's a steep curve in your fellowship, but it keeps going on and on. And I don't really espouse that philosophy that, there's a steep curve or a plateau or whatever it is. If you're a willing learner, it's always a steep curve. You'll always keep learning. And so, my advice is, don't stop learning, but you've got to be careful about separating, at least in your mind, your professional and personal lives. It's really important to not let one encroach on the other as much as you can. And especially when you're young and trying to grow your career and build your career, it's very easy to lose sight of things at home. And you know, you may regret that after a period of time. I've seen a lot of people regret that later on. But when you do it the other way around, you probably will never regret having spent time with your family.
Sure.
That you'll never regret. You know, you may you may regret, you know, other things as well, but you'll never regret having spent time with your family. But you spend a lot of time at work, and you know, you burn midnight oil, so to speak, and burn yourself to the ground. That's where burnout becomes a real issue, and that starts affecting everything that you're doing. And so, you know, I understand that a lot of folks in my generation feel that they don't have a very high opinion of burnout, and they feel they're naturally resilient, but I think we're actually survivors, and we've sort of seen things happen along the way, but we've sort of adopted our own principles to keep burnout at bay. But I also realized that things were different at my stage, and things are different at your stage. You know, I hate it when somebody comes back and says, well, when I was an intern, or when I was a resident, or when I was a fellow, we used to do, 48-hour calls, and what are you complaining about? And, at one point a few years ago, I sort of used to have that attitude where I said, oh, our fellowship was terrible. We used to work like this, and we used to work like dogs, and blah, blah, blah. And so I read an article about, you're not as great as you think you are. Mm-hmm. It was written by a cardiologist, I forget where. And what he said in that was that you tend to remember those worst parts of your memory of your hard work and fellowship as being constant. And you tend to remember those sort of times. And so I said, well, let me test this hypothesis. So I went back and looked at my anesthesia records as to how many cases I did and when did I stay overnight like I claimed I did all the time, and worked after my call day and stuff like that. Very few, much fewer than I thought I had done. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, it was right. I had that sort of confirmation bias, and which sort of, I tried to keep validating the fact that I had worked much harder than you guys did, kind of thing, right? But that's not true. And so I returned after that sort of realization with a healthy respect for how hard every generation works in the OR. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of really wrong to characterize someone's work as harder than someone else's work.
And I actually remember that was one of the first things you said to us. I think when we started that, anyone you work with always thinks they're the hardest worker.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, that's true for them most of the time, and you're not going to convince anyone of otherwise. And so just to accept that everyone, most of the time, is putting their hardest work forward, I think everyone gets along a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think, it's easy to lose sight of the fact and make judgments on what people are like based on what we have seen or, think we're watching. And that may not necessarily be true because everyone has a story behind it. And, so I think, and what I've learned in my role as the vice chair for faculty development and in my role as a, teacher throughout, I guess, is just listening to young faculty and fellows and trainees. And when you listen, you tend to learn a lot. It's like what I called in one of my blogs, the duty factor. Mm-hmm. Ultrasound has a duty factor where it listens for 0.1 or 0.01% of the time, and it transmits for 0.1 to 0.01% of the time and listens for the rest. And that's why it's a great imager. So that's the duty factor. So you've got to have a high duty factor.
I like that. I think that's a great way to end. Let us all have a high duty factor. Tell folks where they can find, either you on social media or if they want to read more about your blogs, things like that.
Yeah, when I was ASE president last year, I wrote a series of blogs every month, and it was based on some very personal and professional experiences. So I tried to make it as relatable as possible to what people experience all the time. And so that's available on the ASE website. I don't know how long they'll keep it up, but it's available there. I also sometimes spend my thoughts on Twitter in less than 240 characters, I guess. And and so Twitter is one where I frequently post professional and personal stuff. I'm also on Facebook where it's mostly personal stuff, but I mostly use that for networking with family and friends rather than post stuff. And of course, there's Instagram where I see you most of the time, and a lot of other friends as well. But that's where I use it for my, personal sort of identity, where I post things about food and cooking and about my kids and stuff like that. So all that's very, very gratifying to me. I like to stay connected with people and have a big network of friends and family, and that's how I do it. I'm also active on LinkedIn for professional reasons, but I find that to be less satisfying, at this point. But yeah, I'm active on social media, so anyone can find me if you just search.
Great. Well, I'm honored and lucky to be part of that network. Dr. Swami, thanks again so much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate it, and I hope you stay safe and happy and healthy in this interesting time.
This is a very unique time, and thank you, Stephen. I've been really glad to see, and I'm proud to see what you're developing into. Literally, a fine family man, a dad, an anesthesiologist, like you say, a dad anesthesiologist. Tremendous, phenomenal work. So keep doing what you're doing. You write really well. And so it's really heartwarming to see you grow like the way you have. Thank you so much, and you stay safe as well.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Take care. You too. Bye-bye.